Okay, hello and welcome to my Unity lessons. This is primarily for incoming sophomores who are going to be taking the game production course, as I am. I heard that it's going to be mostly Unity and C Sharp, so I figured I'd just give everyone a little bit of a head start and teach you what I know. For background, I've been using Unity for close to 5 years. I taught myself C Sharp, but C Sharp is a pretty general programming language. It's easy to learn, especially if you know Java, because C Sharp and Java are almost exactly the same in their syntax. So let us go ahead and get started. So first off, you're going to need Unity. You can get Unity from unity3d.com. It's what we're going to be using. It's great, and it's completely free if you choose the personal license. Next, what you're going to want to do is get Visual Studio. Now, there is an option while you are installing Unity to download Visual Studio. I'd go ahead and do that, but if anything messes up with your download, go ahead and download it straight from visualstudio.com. If Visual Studio isn't your thing, you can use MonoDevelop, which I will show you later on. So after you've downloaded Unity, I'm using Unity 5.6.1 F1, which is the most current version as of the 24th of May of 2017. You're going to click on it to open it up. I have already started some things, but you're going to click up here, which is New, after you sign into your account. And we're just going to call this test project. We're going to save this under my personal projects and right down there. We're going to keep it 3D for now, and we're not going to add any asset packages. Asset packages are really nice because they come preloaded with stuff that you might need, but you really don't need them if you're just making a game in your free time, because you're going to be making a lot of your assets yourself. So after you do that, go ahead and create project, and it's going to have a fairly long load up cycle, just like this. And there we go. So it's going to be loading everything in the bottom right corner. As soon as it's loaded, you should see something like this. This is your Unity workspace. Over here, you can see Services tab. You don't really need this until later on, or if you want to be doing other stuff. Or other stuff later on with your game, such as ads and collaborative projects. So for right now, I want you to just go to Inspector and select that. Now, yours might not look like this. I have this window configuration set up because it's the way I like to work. You can set it up however you want by clicking and dragging on the name. It will lock to different portions of the screen, and if you wanted to put it like I did here and have tabs, just go ahead and do that, and you can click back and forth. So there we have it. This is a standard 3D project. To move around the scene, I'm using scroll wheel to go in and out. You can use just normal left click to select things. You can use right click to move the direction you're facing. This does not move your actual camera, just the direction you're looking. And then you're going to use alt click. This is alt left click to move around at a point, alt right click to zoom in and out, and then middle mouse click to move your actual camera. So what I like to do is just, you can mostly just move around just using your mouse, just by doing stuff like this. If you're trying to zoom in on something really small, you can, and it's like too much time, just go ahead and click on it and press the F button, and it will focus your camera on that. That way, when you alt left click, it focuses around that central object. This is really useful when you're building your game and you need to see something from another perspective, or just in general when you want to hop around to things. F, zoom in and out. stuff like that. So like I said, this is your general 3D project. Unity is very interesting as an engine because the 2D and 3D modes are simultaneous almost. If you wanted to see your game in 2D, you're going to go up here under Scene and select select the 2D button, and this will give you your 2D workspace. Unselect it to bring it back to 3D. You don't need to worry about all these other buttons for now. Also, I just realized I should probably mention what all of these things are that you're seeing, so I'm just going to do that right now. So here is your scene. This is your main work environment. This is where you're going to be building the game and stuff like that. Down here is your game window. This is everything that is shown out of your main camera right here. You can click on it and you can see it in the inspector, which I'll get to later, and that will show you the different properties. You click away to just deselect it. Here is your hierarchy. This is one of the most important things that you're going to have while making a game, so I'd suggest leaving it open at all times. Down here is your project window. This contains all of your assets once you load them in. Now your assets you can find in the Explorer. It is a normal file that you can access. You just go to your save directory, double click on assets, and you can drag anything you want into there, and it will show up down here. Console is where you're going to be seeing any errors that come up, any debug logs that you write to yourself, and just general useful information that tells you why your game is or isn't working. And then over here at Inspector, this is another really important part. This shows you all of the details of the thing that you are selecting. So right here, I have selected the main camera under the hierarchy, and you see it comes with some default components. I got that word from right here, add component. So you have your transform, and this controls the position, X, Y, and Z, rotation, and scale of the object. You also have a very specific component called camera. This comes default with the main camera object. You're going to have stuff like this. I would not mess with it. It's set to default for a reason because it's good. If you really want to change stuff, you can mess around with these different options. Something I do want to talk about is the skybox, but I will get to that later on in this video. Down here you also see things like GUI layer, flare layer, audio listener. Just for now, leave all of this default. Let's say you want to change your camera position. You're going to go either here and drag or input a number into these boxes, or you can go to your scene and click and drag on the various arrows pointing out of your object. Many of you will find this familiar to the Maya version if you've used Maya before, and it goes to the same level of usage. The arrows control the X, Y, and Z direction, as you can see up here, and so on. You can click the boxes to drag around just like that, and that is the basics of your movement. I'm going to be setting this to 0, and let's move on to our next part. So, even though you don't have anything in here right now, you can tell by this right here, untitled, that you need to save it. Right? You don't actually have anything in your project right now. So in order to save it, you are going to go up to here, File, and then Save Scenes. Now, Unity doesn't work in a giant file like GameMaker does. Instead of having one giant project with multiple rooms, Unity saves these various rooms under one giant project. So you're not actually saving the project, even though you can click Save Project down here. When you're pressing Control S, you're saving the scene. So right now, we're going to click on Save Scene, and let's just name this Test. It's going to save as a .unity file, and it will show up under your assets list. Now, like I said before, if you open up an Explorer and you go under Assets, you will see your Unity scene file and your meta file. Don't change this, it's just good for you to know where everything is. Another good thing is to organize your assets folder, because trust me, this will get very cluttered very quickly. So to do that, you're going to right click, go to create, and ignore all of this stuff for now. Just look at folder. You're going to click on that folder, and I'm just going to name this scenes. After you've done that, you can click and drag test into scenes, and it will be down there. And you can also see this in there. So after you've created your scene and you've saved it, you're probably going to want to know how to personalize this version of Unity to your own specifications. So you're going to go to File. Nope, you're not going to go to File. You're going to go to, I know what I'm doing, Preferences, and you're going to click on Preferences. This is going to open up another window, and for the most part, you can go and change this as you will. I'm just going to click through really quick to show you my setup. Stuff down here, like your SDK, JDK, and stuff like that. All of this is for when you're exporting it to Android Store and different devices, so you don't have to worry about that for right now. This is something I do want to talk about, the external script editor. Earlier when I said that you could either download Visual Studio or MonoDevelop, this is where you're going to select it. So you click on this, and you can either browse to find it, you can select Visual Studio 2015, or I have Visual Studio 2015 downloaded. I think there's a 2017 version out now. Either one's fine. And then there's also MonoDevelop. MonoDevelop works really well, so don't worry about that if you don't want to use Visual Studio. It's just another compiler, it works well, and they both have autocomplete, so it helps when you're coding. Colors, I would suggest having a play mode tint. This color tints the screen when you are in play mode. As you can see, changed color there. This is because, let's say you don't have maximize on play down here. If you press play, your game is running, but you can still make changes to it. You can still like move this position, you can do all that, and you're like, and maybe you make some major change in here, and you're like, oh, this is really good, let me play it and see how it works. Well, as soon as you press the play button to end the session, it's going to convert everything that you've done inside of that play session back to before you pressed it. So having a tint like that, I would suggest for most people. I don't really, I should probably have one. I'm going to do it right now. I just use red because it's a pretty obvious color, but you do you. So after that, there's that. You don't have to use any of this. JCache, nope, 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 nope. So after you've personalized it like that, you're probably going to want to look at your skybox and personalize that as well. So we're going to go to our, I know what I'm doing. We are going to go to a thing, and I will cut to that thing when I find it. So I found it. In order to edit the skybox, just close that, you're going to go to Window, Lighting, Settings. And here you will find your skybox material. You can change it to anything you'd like. I recommend putting it on this one, Frame Debugger Render. If you don't want to go through here, you can always go to your main camera, and instead of selecting skybox for clear flags, you can do solid color. This will accomplish the same thing as the skybox, except it's making it a solid color like so. So for right now, we're going to make this a dark black, because that is what we're going to be using later on. So now that you have your scene set up the way you like it, we can start talking about actually putting in objects. So since this is a 3D game, we are going to go to Game Object, 3D Object, and let's just create a cube. Here we go. So here I have a cube, and we can move it around like so. If your cube does not have an orange outline around it, don't worry. It's doing something. Not really sure what. I can't remember if that's normal or not. I'm just gonna say it's normal. But either way, we have our cube now, and we can move it around. But maybe this cube isn't the right size. Maybe you want it to be a bit bigger. So now you're going to be learning again about the QWERT keys, the QWERTY. Q just unselects all parts of the editable object. It's still selected, but you can't do anything to it. Well, actually, because you have your hand, so you can move like this, just like middle click. W moves it just like so. You can edit it around like that. E rotates the object. You can rotate it like this. This big circle rotates it on your view perspective. I would highly not recommend that because it messes a lot of things up. R makes the scale of it. You can use the middle one to scale up or down. And then T is something used pretty much only for 2D. In a 2D workspace, it scales sprites and such to different dimensions because you can see this box, but in 3D it's a little useless. So now that we've done that, you can also edit everything in your inspector under the transform position. So I'm going to set this to 008 for the position, and then 000 for the rotation because I'm boring, and not 0, 1, 1, 1 for the scale. And there you go. That is how you edit various objects. It goes the same when you're creating any other 3D object or even a 2D object such as a sprite. One thing I do want to point out right now are the planes and the quads. So a plane is an object like this, but it only has one side. So you cannot see the underside of it. You can only see the top of it. This is useful in games because sometimes you don't want the game to render the underside of an object because they will just take up too much memory, and it will just make the game run sluggish. So you are going to want to use planes and quads, quads being the opposite of a plane, where it's kind of like a wall. Of course, you can use only quads, only planes, and turn them. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you look down in the game display, it will disappear as I move it around and reappear as it's coming back. So there's that. If we turn on 2D, this is what the 2D workspace looks like. As I said earlier, Unity does support 3D objects in a 2D environment and vice versa. You can see down in the game section that the object still retains its 3D properties, even if under scene it does not. There we go. And of course, to delete an object, like I've been doing this whole time, you need to select it and just press delete. That's fine. You know, it's pretty simple stuff. So there are other ways of creating things besides going to game object and all of this stuff. One way you can do it is click down here, go to create. Now this doesn't actually have the game objects, but this is a bunch of other stuff that you'll need in your game, like different scenes or rooms if you're coming from GameMaker, prefabs, which I'll get to in another video, materials, and so on and so forth. For right now, I'm going to be creating another game object, and then up here is another way that you can create actual objects. Think of it this way. In your hierarchy is where you have the actual objects that are going to be used in your game, and under project is where you're going to be having the kind of abstract thought of those things, such as the code and prefabs that I'll get to earlier. So down here, I'm going to create another cube, and I'm going to show you what a material is. Because as you saw down here, or in the inspector, it has a default material, but let's say we want to change that. Let's say we want to make this a different color. we're going to go to create, and we're going to create a material. Now we're going to name this material red mat. You can name it whatever you want. Naming isn't important. It's just something that you know. Then before pressing enter, you're going to come down here and under main maps, go to albedo, and select whatever color you want it to be. I'm going to make this a nice bright red. So after you've done that, and you can come back and go and change it like this. I guess that was from an older version of Unity that I used that wouldn't let you change it after you clicked away. But after you've done that, you can either drag it up to here to apply the material, or you can drag it onto your actual object. And this will now give you the material that you are looking for. Very nice and shiny and red. There we go. And now down here you can see that the default material is gone. If we click down here on this down arrow, you see the same kind of options that you saw when you clicked on the actual material itself. So there you go. But let's say you don't want to use just these blocks and spheres and stuff like that. Let's say you want to put in your very own objects that you've created in something like Maya or Blender. So in order to do that, you are going to go to your Explorer of your project. You're going to open up your Assets folder, and then in another window, you're going to go to wherever you have exported the object that you want to use. So I have already created some 3D objects for my Dungeon Shop Simulator. So I'm going to take them from there. Under my assets, I have my Maya prefabs, and I'm going to put in my sword. So it is a FBX file. That's what I exported it as. And you're going to have to play around to see what other files work. I'm not entirely sure. I know FBX works. I'm pretty sure an OBJ works. But in Maya, it has an export to Unity function, which is really awesome. So I would just use that unless you want to keep it out for different reasons. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to paste it in here. And now it's here. And when I click back on Unity, it's going to load. It's going to say it's importing assets. And I can go ahead and drag this sword in. Now it's very small because I modeled it oddly, but here's the sword. Now in Maya, I did in Maya, I did put textures on it. As you can see here, there's like a wooden handle with a slightly shinier metal and then the actual blade. And this you can see under your project file if you click on the arrow right next to the icon. It will show you the actual object as well as the avatar for it. And it didn't show you what I thought it would show you. But hey, you have your object, and that's all that matters, right? Here it is, that's what I was talking about. These are the materials that you assigned in Maya or Blender, and you can change them as you would like, although I would not suggest it. Of course, Control-Z works just as expected. Also, you have noticed when I'm using the mouse wheel, it jumps like this. So this is where Alt right click comes in handy if you really want to get close to it. Also, a great thing about Unity is if you're watching my cursor, if you go below the screen, it comes out the top, and left and right, vice versa. It has an endless scrolling capability. So we're going to delete that. We're going to go back to our cube. We're going to zoom out. And next, I'm going to tell you about prefabs, the word that I have been using throughout this entire video that I should probably define by now. So a prefab is something that has been made before that you put in your project folder in order to be called out for later use. Now, it sounds complicated. It's really not. Think of it this way. Let's say you are making a gun, and this gun shoots some very specific kind of bullet. Now, if you want this bullet to, let's say, ricochet off a wall, but only once, you would have to put code on that object to make it ricochet off a wall only once. Now, you don't want to, have every single bullet in the game coded and kind of predict how many times the player is going to fire, because that's you just can't do that. So instead of doing that, what you're going to do is you're going to make your object in the scene, assign all of the different code that you need to it, and then you're going to click and drag and bring it down into your project window. Bringing it down there will create a prefab of an object, and from there you can drag it again and again and again. And now this object will be exactly the same as all of the other objects. And you can tell they're prefab by, in the hierarchy, they're highlighted blue unless you've changed that in your preferences. So let's say we want to make a change to all of the bullets. You found out that there was a error in the sizing, and now your bullets are way too small to be seen, or something of that like. So you're going to want to do one of two things. One, you could either bring the bullet into the scene and adjust it as you would like, and then up here, click Apply. This will take the prefab and update it so that all of the other objects with the same prefab, or all the other objects of the same prefab, will get that update as well, as you can see here. Another way to do it is to actually click on the object itself and change it there. And this will instantly change all of the objects without needing to update it. So let's go back to 1. And after doing that, go ahead and delete those. And so that is what a prefab is. They're very useful, and later on in a couple other videos, when we actually get to creating our game, you will find out how useful those prefabs are, especially when dealing with randomly generated obstacles. Now, last but not least, I want to show you how you can add your own components to an object. So down here, there is an Add Component button, and you click that, and there's a search up here, which is really helpful, but there are very, let me restart that. There are many drop down or drop out menus that you can select, which will provide many different things. One of the first things you're going to need is a mesh collider, but most things come with that. Most objects, when you create them, come with a mesh collider, a box collider, a mesh renderer, and transform, and a shader. So a lot of the stuff you don't have to re-import. If you do put in another thing, let's say I put in another mesh renderer, it says it already contains the same component, so don't worry about accidentally clicking on something and having to scroll through all your components to see if you've accidentally made another one. So a mesh is just there in case you delete it. Effects, these are really awesome, but they take up a lot of processing power for your computer, since they're creating particles that follow the object. I'd use this sparingly, but they're really cool if you get them working. Physics, so you have your rigid body, which is one of the most important things. Let me show you why. Let's say you're making a 3D game and you want to have gravity. Well, you press the play button and your cube isn't moving. It has no gravity to it. But if you go to physics and you add a rigid body, this has, hit apply of course, this has gravity and drag and a lot of math already built in. So now if you press play, your thing is going to drop like a stone until it hits an object, which I'll get to later on. So there's that. Now constraints. These are really awesome. I'll talk to them in the next video. But basically, let's say you don't want your object falling in the Y direction. Well, that's fine. Just put a constraint on it, and it won't do it anymore. And so that's pretty much it for add components. We're going to be using this a lot. This is how you go and add new scripts. You can change between C# and JavaScript. There used to be a script called Boo. It wasn't very popular. Unity removed it for obvious reasons, but we're going to be using C#. A lot of this, like UI and animations, we'll be getting to that in later videos. Something that you do need to know is that depending on what you're using as your object, either a 3D object or a 2D object, you need to put the correct physics on them. They have very different rules, and if you mess it up, then your game just won't work. Simple as that. Well, okay. Looks like I'm all done for my intro to Unity lesson. Next video, I will be showing you how to make things move.